Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Defiant Takes Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at TheMaxDean, and I am back with the full crew for the Pick'em Sunday show. We have Brison Owens at BrisonOwens16 on Twitter, and we have Kyle Nishida at Kyle_Nishida on Twitter. And it has been, 8 months now? 8 months since we've gotten on the horn and gotten to talk football on a weekend morning. How you doing, Brison?
I'm doing really well so far. I'm going to be a little bit slow. I was up until 2 a.m. watching the CSU-CU game, so I might be a little bit slow to start this morning, but I'm excited for a week 2 for the NFL.
Yeah, it was kind of a late night for me as well, so I'm a little bit sleepy here. Kyle, we really have no room to talk because it is really, truly early out on the West Coast. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I was up late last night watching a game that I didn't think would ever go to double overtime, actually go to double overtime. So, yeah, Colorado pulling that out was an interesting show. But yeah, sorry about last week. That's totally on me. But really happy to be back and ready to get going with the really interesting week 2 after a wild week 1.
Yes. Yeah. Week 2 is looking interesting, especially, I feel like there were a couple of surprises in week 1. A lot of things went pretty much the way that we expected them to. But those surprises from week 1 or those things that were shown to us week 1, they are all being questioned, right? There's a lot of things that we think we might know, but week 2 will help us solidify a little bit. So we're going to pick every single game against the spread, starting with the earliest 1 o'clock games on the East Coast for Sunday, finishing with Sunday Night Football. So these are only this Sunday slate. We're going to pick against the spread, talk about some injuries, and we're going to jump right into it. So, Kyle, we've had your picks spiritually here for sure. Let's see, last week I went 10-6. Kyle, you went 9-8. Is that right?
8. Yeah, I think I went 8-8, and then they counted the Thursday night game in the pick them.
Oh yeah, well, because it's an accumulation over the whole season, and then Brison, you went 9-8. Is that right?
I went 9-7 for week 1, and then
7,
like Kyle, the start of week 2.
Gotcha. Right. Yeah, that's why I'm thinking about it like that. Okay, so Kyle, 8-8 last week. Brison 9-7 last week. I went 10-6, and then I got the Thursday night game correct. Just squeaked in, just barely.
You and me both.
Yeah. So I was
the backdoor Vikings killed me.
That's what I thought, because they're so explosive. They can score at any time. That I never want to pick a large spread against them, because they'll always have that chance to come in the back door at the end of the game, if not outright be winning. But the Eagles are good, so kind of saw that coming. All right, so we're going to start with the earliest of games, and we have the Packers at -1.5 going into the Atlanta Falcons. The Packers have Aaron Jones, Christian Watson, David Bakhtiari, and Quay Walker as questionable. Important players for sure, especially Aaron Jones, who was the majority of their offense last week, and Bakhtiari being a very important member of their offensive line. And the Falcons are missing for sure Troy Anderson, linebacker, and cornerback Jeff Okudah is questionable. So, Brison, based on this information, how these two teams looked last week, 2 1-0 teams, who do you think is coming out on top?
I really like the Packers in this one, especially at this kind of spread. I mean, it's so low that you don't need the Packers to win by much. One of my favorite things about the Packers so far this season, it was my favorite stat going into the preseason going into the season, that Jordan Love didn't get pressured at all in the preseason. And in week 1, he faced, according to PFF, just 2 total pressures, and the Green Bay Packers had the best pass blocking offensive line in the NFL last week. So that's really a big reason why Jordan Love had a game that he did against the Bears. And then this Falcons offense it doesn't excite me. I know Bijan's going to be really fun to watch, and Drake London, who didn't get anything going last week, is going to be a good player this year. But outside of that, there's really not much going on with this Falcons offense that gets me going. And you look at the strength of this Falcons offense is that run game. And the Packers, they gave up 122 rushing yards last week, but most of that was to Justin Fields. The Bears running backs really didn't do much in that game. And Desmond Ritter's not going to run the ball like Justin Fields will. So I don't think the Falcons are going to exploit that part of the Packers defense like the Bears could in times last week. So I think the defense is going to perform really well. I don't think Jordan Love's going to face very many pressures again this week. And despite the injury to Aaron Jones and Christian Watson maybe not playing again this week, there's not a lot of options for Jordan Love going into this one. But I think it's going to be enough to squeak with a pretty close win.
Yeah, could be. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same line of thinking as Bryson is. I thought it's kind of interesting watching the line because obviously I believe this is what the number opened up as, and it's flipped to the Falcons now, and the Falcons are actually favored, and that's perfectly fine with me. I'll take the points with Green Bay at whatever line this is. This would also be one now where you could throw in a teaser and get Green Bay at plus 7.5 now, maybe plus 8.5. If you feel strongly about that, just in terms of being able to get past those key numbers. But I'm kind of with Bryson in terms of the mindset or like the way I see the game. I like Green Bay. I think even though they aren't like they're not going to have Aaron Jones, I don't see that as being as much of a hindrance to their offense. AJ Dillon's more than capable of carrying the load. They've got good solid outsiders, solid options for Love to throw to. I thought Luke Musgrave as a tight end was really good for them in week 1. So I would anticipate him to be being part of their offense again. And the other part is Love did a really good job spraying around. So it's not like the Falcons can key on one person. Whereas if Watson was playing, that would be the case. I also think it's funny. I picked the Falcons to win the NFC South this year. And yeah, just my thought process. Oh, they have all these weapons, yet here I am watching week 1, and Arthur Smith is just loading up Tyler Algier opportunities as opposed to using all his other weapons on the team. But in the mindset of just this game, I think the Packers, whether it's minus 1.5 or if you get them at the underdog, I'd take that. And I think that's the best pick so far.
Yeah. So you said this is the spread is currently switched on.
It's moving right now. I'm looking at DraftKings now. The Packers are now a 3-point favorite or a 3-point underdog. So it's literally flipped quite a bit since it opened.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm using the ESPN Pick'em, which is the easiest one to use, but also I don't think that they update as quickly as some of the books do. And I mean, that's just rolling with the betting. I think this game has been flipping maybe back and forth for a couple of days now. So it's tight. I think for the sake of the pick'em here, I will take. You know what? I'll take the Packers. I'll take the Packers at minus 1.5. So I guess if that's the case, then I would also take them as underdogs here. But for the sake of our pick'em and just where it's being recorded, I'll also take them at minus 1.5, just because their defense is legitimately good. Now, I think the Falcons' offense is going to be better than the Bears' offense. There's really no question about that for me. And I think that they will have some plays. Pitts will have some plays. Robinson will have some plays. Algier will have some plays. Everyone will get something. And I think they'll go to Drake London, I'm sure, at some point, because I don't think that they're going to be able to run the ball nearly as easily as they did against the Panthers. But I think the Packers defense is good enough overall that they can bend without breaking. Their offense is a little bit of a question because Aaron Jones can handle a load, but he's not nearly as explosive as a guy like Aaron Jones is. Or I'm not sure if I just said Aaron Jones twice, but AJ Dillon can certainly handle the load, but he's not explosive as uh, Aaron Jones is. So they won't be able to rely on those chunk plays as much, I think. So I'm just also simultaneously not as excited about the pass rush ability of the Falcons. So the loss of David Bakhtiari is not as worrying to me. Now I do recognize this is a super close game, so I don't say this confidently. But if we have to pick something, then I'll go with the Packers here. All right. Next up, we have the Las Vegas Raiders plus 8.5 at Buffalo Bills. So Buffalo Bills coming off of the week 1 loss on Monday night. Definitely painful for them getting down 0-1 in the conference. But this does feel like a get-right game, right? They have a far inferior team coming into their house for their home opener. Do you think, Brison, that the Bills are going to be able to cover an 8.5-point spread?
Yeah, I don't love this one because it's such a huge spread, and you saw how much the Bills struggled, and the Raiders got a pretty, I wouldn't say shocking, but they got a pretty surprising week 1 win. But I think this is a get-right game for Buffalo. I think starting on the road back-to-back weeks to start your season for the Raiders is really tough. Going into Buffalo week 2, very tough. And you got a team in Buffalo who's pissed off about how that their first game went. You know, obviously they should have probably felt like they were going to win once Aaron Rodgers went down. They had Zach Wilson out there for the Jets, and the Bills just, for whatever reason, couldn't get anything going offensively. Now, that's against the Jets defense, which is going to be one of the best in the NFL. And now they're going against this Raiders defense, which is a pretty marginal difference in terms of talent. It's pretty wide, the gap between the Jets and the Raiders defense. I mean, Russell Wilson wasn't great against the Raiders. He still threw 2 touchdown passes against them. Now you've got Josh Allen coming in here with Stephon Diggs, a much more explosive, talented offense. I think this defense is going to perform better against the Raiders. I don't love the number, but I like the Bill. There's no part of me that thinks the Raiders can hang with this Bills team, honestly. And so in a get-right game this early in the season, I think Buffalo is going to show out.
I should just say that as far as injuries, they're pretty light. The Raiders are missing Jacoby Myers and Chandler Jones, while the Bills do not seem to be missing anybody, nor is anybody even questionable.
And I mean, missing Jacoby Myers is actually kind of a big deal. Myers was very, very good for the Raiders in week 1. They kind of picked on Damari Mathis with Jacoby Myers all game. They didn't even really focus on Devontae Adams. And so now with no Jacoby Myers in there, Buffalo is just going to put all their focus on Devontae and see if the Raiders can run the football on them, which I don't know how that's going to go for them.
Yeah, I don't love this number, kind of for the same reasons that Brison mentioned. Like, again, 8.5 is quite a bit of points, and especially coming off the way the Bills looked offensively, kind of the same of what they were looking at the end of last year. A lot of Josh Allen trying to force things down the field as opposed to just taking the simpler shots underneath the coverage.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd probably say you're on the safer side of just going with the Bills. The Bills using this as an opportunity as a get right game, kind of getting their season going and on the way that they thought it would be. I do think the loss of Jacoby Myers is big because again they're kind of just Devontae Adams and Tre'Davious White can hold his own against Devontae Adams. He's one of the few quarterbacks that can. So if you shut that down, then what the Raiders are left with guys like a rookie tight end and Michael Mayer, and so their options are really limited. You didn't really see Josh Jacobs get going in week 1. Now that may be a part to the Broncos defense, but at the same time, again, this is a guy that was holding out prior to week 1. So we're they're kind of just in this weird situation. The Raiders are. I think they're happy they got the win. But I anticipate Buffalo is going to turn this around and get their season going like the way I think they believe it should have gotten on Monday.
Yeah, I think that with Buffalo, whatever criticism you want to throw at Josh Allen for forcing things, for getting a little bit too frantic perhaps, and trying to go for the kill shot against the Jets, I don't think it's going to be necessary against the Raiders. I think he's just going to have such an easier time moving the ball just up and down the field. They'll get that relatively early lead that they like to play with, and then their pass rush will really be able to get off, which they couldn't really do as much against the Jets because the game was too close. And then, of course, the Jets defense is very good as well. So I think this is a game where people are going to be like, oh, okay, all right. Like I'm more comfortable at 1-1. I don't feel like the world is falling around us in regards to Bills fans or whoever has Bills players on their fantasy team. I feel like this is the game where people are going to feel more comfortable. 8.5 is big, but I do think it's one of those games where once they get a lead, the mistakes will start to crop up for the Raiders as they try and chase that lead towards the end of the game. So I'll take the Bills minus 8.5 as well. All right, next up, the Baltimore Ravens are underdogs at the Cincinnati Bengals, despite the week that the Bengals had last week. Now, I think this suggests that most people are of the opinion that we are not going to see something like that from Joe Burrow again. And the Ravens, they showed some good things, certainly against the Texans, but the Bengals are significantly better on both sides of the ball. And they are missing a few players as well. To pull this up, the Ravens are 100% missing Ronnie Stanley, Tyler Linderbaum, so two starting members of their offensive line, as well as cornerback Marcus Humphrey and safety Marcus Williams, with tight end Mark Andrews being questionable. And if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of looking like he's not going to play, but I can see if there's an update on that. While the Bengals are missing running back Chris Evans, edge rusher Joseph Osai, and linebacker Marcus Bailey. So, Bryson, do you think that Burrow has a rapid turnaround or comeback, or do you think it's going to still take a couple of games before he's right?
I think it's going to take a couple more games for Joe Burrow to get back to like MVP Joe Burrow. But I do think I'm confident enough in the Bengals to have a get right game, kind of like the Bills. I think the Bengals are a little bit pissed off about how they played last week. I should have known to not take the Bengals week 1. They're playing the Browns. Browns have their number, and the Bengals with Joe Burrow start slow in week 1. So that was a mistake on my end. Shouldn't have picked the Bengals. I'm picking them in this week largely because of the amount of important injuries you just mentioned, Max. I mean, missing 2 of their starting offensive linemen against this Bengals defensive line's huge, and then missing 2 of their starting secondary players with the amount of talent this Bengals offense has just in terms of wide receivers alone. So I think this is going to be a better chance for the Bengals to exploit some of the weaknesses of the Ravens with all these injuries. I think Joe Burrow, we're never going to see, in my opinion, Joe Burrow play that poorly again. I think he's going to have a big bounce back game. I think the Bengals offense as a whole is going to perform better. I wasn't overly impressed with Lamar last week. I thought he was just okay. I mean, he threw for 17 of 22, 169 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick against the Texans last week in a blowout win. They won pretty comfortably, but this Bengals defense is better than the Texans defense, and Lamar is going to have to perform a little bit better than he did last week. And he's missing J.K. Dobbins again. So his starting running backs out there back to using, running back by committee, mostly by Gus Edwards. It's going to be interesting to see how Baltimore shakes around that, but I think Cincinnati's the better team here. And I'm pretty confident in taking them at the -3.5 mark.
Yeah, I'm actually on the other side in this game, and it's kind of just one of these things where we talk, like last week's a perfect example of like what I'm kind of going through is like Joe Burrow has historically not been good against the Browns. It's one of the funniest things there where like certain guys just have certain issues with certain teams. It's the opposite for Lamar Jackson. This is a the Bengals are a team he actually plays really, or he has a really good record against. He's 6-2 against them in his career as a starter. So again, you're telling me I'm getting a guy that does well in the win-loss record against this team, and I'm getting a field goal, at least a field goal for him to cover. I'll take that every single time. And I understand the whole point with J.K. Dobbins being gone, but again, this offense comes down to whether or not Lamar Jackson doesn't turn the ball over. They are more than capable of controlling, even with whatever the weapons are. They were perfectly fine with limited weapons last year. The only issue was when they lost games that they shouldn't have is because Lamar would turn the ball over. Now, he did turn it over against the Texans. You won't get away with that against the Bengals. But again, I think they're still working out some kinks on the offense. I think the addition of Zay Flowers, even if Mark Andrews doesn't play, Zay Flowers has been really good for them. They were talking about him all preseason. He comes out in his first game with 9 receptions and 78 yards as a rookie. That's really good. And so I anticipate a high usage again. I look at him in all the player props because I think they're going to be targeting him. Lamar loves targeting him. But for the game, yeah, I'd take the Ravens plus 3.5. I just think that it's just one of those things where one guy has the number of the other team, and this is one of those situations. So I'm going to go with that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I'm going to take the Bengals here just because I think that it for just the sake of averages, really, I just don't anticipate the Ravens getting an early lead on the Bengals in the season standings, more so than just this game. So it just seems less likely to me that the Ravens are up 2-0 while the Bengals are down 0-2 with them having to come back. Now, while I certainly could see that happening, I just have a more instinctual feeling that they're both going to come out of this 1-1 and they'll be duking it out for the division throughout the entire year. And the Ravens, they are missing a lot of guys. Now, I understand it looks like Mark Andrews may play, and they do have some other weapons, but the two missing players from their starting offensive line are the biggest thing for me because they're not going to be able to run the ball as effectively without those two guys in, I think. And then Marcus Williams, he's a loss, but I don't think he's as big of a loss. But Marlon Humphrey is significantly their best cornerback. And so that is definitely a loss for them as well. So I will take the Bengals to cover -3.5. And I feel good about that 3.5, even if I don't ultimately get the win for the Bengals outright. All right.
I will
Seahawks?
add one. Oh, sorry. I will add one thing I forgot to mention. This is an interesting note. Zach Taylor is actually, in the 5 years he's been head coach, he's started 0-2 to start the season 4 out of those 5 times. So again, slow starts not out of the question with this team in terms of the Bengals.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it does always feel like that. And Bryson, you talked about it even before the game last week. So it's certainly possible. All right. So we have for our next game, the Seahawks +6.5 at the Lions. So I think coming into the season, most people would not have put the line this wide, right? If you're looking down the stretch and you're looking at odds on September 4th, and we're looking at week 2. I think most people would have had the Seahawks and Lions much closer if the Seahawks not with the advantage here. But after the performance against the Chiefs on Thursday night and the pretty disappointing performance against the Rams for the Seahawks, then, you can see how this line starts to spread. The Seahawks are missing Charles Cross, defensive end Mike Morris, and safety Jamal Adams again. And then they have linebacker Devin Bush and edge rusher Boye Mafe as questionable, while the Lions are missing their left tackle Taylor Decker, defensive lineman Josh Pascal, and then corner Khalil Dorsey and corner Emmanuel Mosley. So they are losing a few starters there, including Mosley and Decker. But it looks like people are still trusting them to beat the Seahawks soundly. Bryson, what do you think about the Lions hosting the Seahawks?
This is another one of it's kind of like the Bills one that I don't love the line here, but I'm going to take the Lions in this one. It was close. I'm very 50-50 on this line here. A lot of it comes down to the offensive line versus defensive line play for both these teams. The Lions last week allowed, according to PFF, that's who I'm using for most of these offensive line breakdowns, they have the Lions as the third best offensive line so far this season and allowed just 5 pressures all of last week versus the Chiefs. Now, that was 5 pressures without Chris Jones, but still only 5 pressures for an entire football game. Meanwhile, Seattle missing both their tackles, both their young, very talented tackles in this game, and they have them as the 31st ranked offensive line after week 1 because their backup right tackle, Jake Curran, gave up 4 pressures on 11 snaps. So it's that offensive line, I think, is going to struggle a little bit against this defensive line for the Lions, who Aiden Hutchinson played a really good game against the Chiefs. I know they didn't get to Mahomes really, but they pressured him a lot. Aiden Hutchinson specifically really made life difficult on Mahomes at times. I think he's going to have a similar success here against Seattle, and Seattle couldn't get anything going against the Rams with that pass rush. The Rams have a restart offensive line. It's not the most talented unit, but they couldn't get any pressure on Matthew Stafford last week, and that's a little bit concerning to me. Geno Smith was pretty bad last week, which I don't think he's going to be that bad again this week, but that was a little concerning to me. Meanwhile, this Lions offense, it's got plenty of weapons. No one can stop Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know that the Seattle Seahawks have really good corners, but I just don't think they're going to have anyone who can stop Amon-Ra in this game. And I think the dynamic run game of the duo of Gibbs and Montgomery is going to lead to the Lions eating clock and just never really giving the Seahawks chances to get in this game. So I don't love them needing to win by a touchdown, but I'm more confident in the Lions going into this game.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, no, I was like, yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, to go along with Brison's point, look, the Seahawks are having issues covering Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell, and now they're going into one of the guys that sees some of the highest volume in terms of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And even with that said, though, I do kind of think this number is a little too high. So I don't know. I don't really believe the Seahawks win this game, but I do think they cover a 6.5 spread. And just kind of a weird note in terms of NFL and against the spread, there's been since 2014, there's been 21 instances of a team going on the road being an underdog after a double-digit loss. Those underdogs are 18-3 against the spread. So there are 3 instances that the Seahawks are one of them today. So I don't fully rely on that, but I think with this number being as high as it is, I think it factors into the equation here. So I would definitely look at that. In terms of just gameplay, I understand all the they're going to be without both their tackles, but I think they'll be able to piecemeal it together. Again, I don't know how good the Lions were. I think the Chiefs were just bad. I didn't think the Lions played overwhelmingly great opening night. So, and I don't think the Seahawks are that bad. While I think there is regression coming for them this season, I don't think they were that bad. I think the Rams are a really good and well-coached team, and those games are always weird for them. So I'm going to go with Seattle plus 6.5, despite all of their kind of issues or the way they are.
Well, I get that. I don't think they were that bad either. The issue is that these injuries are mounting for them. I think the biggest losses are Charles Cross, which means Stone Forsythe, 6th round draft pick from 2 years ago, is going to be their starting left tackle. And then on the other side, we didn't list him as injured because he's on IR, but they're also missing Gabe Lucas. So Jake Curran, an undrafted free agent from 2021, is starting there. So that's tough, especially with Aiden Hutchinson. I just have this feeling that they're kind of not going to be able to get really anything going offensively. Now, they do have all their weapons, so they should have Walker, Charbonnet, Metcalf, Lockett, Smith, and Jigba. All those guys are going to be playing today. So they will get things going there, but I just have this bad feeling like this is going to be one of those games where, we're going to have a lot of pass breakups. We're going to have a lot of tackles around the line of scrimmage because Gino's just not going to have time to push the ball down the field. I think that I get the spread and I understand why, especially because week 1, people overreact so much. But I just think injuries are in a really brutal place for the Seahawks. And even if they play better, I don't know if that will translate to a numerical score. So I'll take the Lions to cover 6.5 here. I don't love big spreads generally, but I have a good feeling about this one. I just think that, it's going to be a raucous crowd in Detroit. How long has it been since Detroit fans have gotten to open a season and really feel really great about where they are? So I think they'll be embracing that moment. So I'll take the Lions to cover 6.5 here. All right. Next up, the Los Angeles Chargers at the Tennessee Titans. So the Chargers went from a team that, could not really stop them defensively for the most part last week. And now they get the Titans, who that's pretty much all they bring to the table is their ability to stop you defensively.
Mm-hmm.
They are only favored a little bit. And both teams are 0-1 coming out of week 1. As far as, let's see, some injuries. Chargers. Okay, so the Chargers are missing Austin Eckler and Eric Kendricks and Chris Rumpf. So starting a linebacker, starting running back, and a depth edge rusher. Deion Henley is doubtful, so he is a player who may have seen some more action with Eric Kendricks being out, but he's unlikely to play. And then Joey Bosa is once again back on the questionable list for them as well. And then the Titans are missing starting offensive tackle, guard, Peter Skoronski, and then cornerback Christian Fulton and safety Amani Hooker, with DeAndre Hopkins being listed as questionable as well. So, Bryson, what do you think? Do you think the Chargers are going to be able to run over this stout Titans defense?
I don't think so. I think the Titans should feel like they really should have won last week. I know it was against the Saints and it was an ugly football game, while the Chargers were just throwing the ball up and down the field in that shootout with Miami. So 2 very different feelings from these teams coming out of week 1, even though they're both 0-1. But I think the Titans defense is going to be good enough to at least kind of slow down the Chargers offense. And, no Austin Eckler, Joey Bosa, even if he plays, he's not going to be 100%. So I think that's going to hurt them a little bit in that pass rush department. I think Derrick Henry is going to get going in this game. He had an okay game last week. I think he's going to have a better one going into this one. DeAndre Hopkins is questionable, but he is, as far as all reports are, he looks like he's going to be able to play in this week, which is huge for the Titans' passing attack. I don't know if the Titans can win this game because I think the Chargers are just overly more talented, but the Titans are very well coached. They're going to be good on defense. They are known for just keeping games close. I don't think that the Chargers are good enough to, as of right now, in my opinion, walk into Tennessee with this talented defense and all and just beat them handedly. So I think the Titans are going to cover the spread. I don't think they're going to win, but they're going to keep it a close game.
Yeah, I keep on going back and forth with this game mainly because the not having Eckler is going to change the dynamic for the Chargers immensely, because all of a sudden without Eckler, it's literally Justin Herbert having to sling the ball around, which is fine. I'm sure Chargers fans would prefer that over than force feeding Eckler or Joshua Kelly. But again, you're opening yourself up to a lot of weird scenarios where you're probably going to end up being close with this Tennessee Titans team. I don't even think the Titans are very good. I think what Tannehill did in week 1 is exactly who he's going to be. And I wouldn't be shocked if they made a quarterback change midway through the season. But the number just is really difficult for me because I do think the Titans have a really good defense. So in terms of the pick 'em, I'll go with the Titans plus 3.5, even though I don't feel great about it. But again, it's really hard to go with the Chargers, especially seeing all their defensive deficiencies. Now, again, not the same offense. Miami's going to do that to a lot of people this year. But like having their similar situation where all their typical guys are out, it doesn't make me feel great. And again, Tennessee's just kind of pesky enough to hang around and possibly just lose this game by 3.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, I'm just looking at this offensive line for the Titans without Peter Skoronski, and it's just it's so uninspired. And I know DeAndre Hopkins is likely to play. I mean, he'll be on the injury report all year. He's going to say questionable every week, and I just think that's because they don't really practice him that much, and that was true in Arizona as well. On the defensive side for the Titans, they are good. Christian Fulton and Amani Hooker both being out is a shame for them, but they kind of seem to get by with, whoever they have out there. It's just always how it's been with Mike Vrabel. I do think that this Chargers team is probably going to win. The question is it going to be by a full 4+ points? And that's kind of what I've been wrestling with. And neither team has really blown me away in terms of confidence for this week, especially because the injuries to the Chargers to Eckler just is so important in keeping the chains moving for them. And then Kendricks is out as well, and their defense didn't play super well. I guess I'll call this close enough to give the Titans the edge in covering. I do think the Chargers will be able to get out on top. So I'll take the Titans to cover, Chargers to win. Okay. Next up, we have the Chicago Bears at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So a lot of the excitement for Bears fans prior to the season already seems to have kind of, it's funny. Despite the Jets losing Aaron Rodgers, I feel like there's a lot more of a loss of optimism for the Chicago fan base than the New York fan base. Because when you go out there and you just have a game against a division rival that's been better than you for so long, and you just look so bad, it's got to be demoralizing. So that's a shame for them. And the Buccaneers did come out 1-0, although I wouldn't say it was, this incredible performance across the board. Bears will be missing defensive back Josh Blackwell and most likely missing starting guard Nate Davis. And the Buccaneers are going to be missing defensive lineman Kalijah Cansey, who did not play last week either. Linebacker Sir Vakia Dennis, I believe his name is pronounced. And Carlton Davis. So their starting corner, and safety Christian Etienne is questionable as well. So mostly Buccaneers are intact. Bears aren't missing too many guys, but again, they don't have an offensive line that can really stand to miss starters either. So, Brison, Bears 0-1 at Buccaneers 1-0. Do the Bears get back on track here a little bit, or do they start to, do they spiral a little bit at 0-2?
I think it's going to be a little bit more spiraling at 0-2. I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers covering this one. A lot of this, you mentioned it last week, Max, this Buccaneers defense is still very talented. It's still a lot of the same guys from that Super Bowl team, and it showed against the Vikings in a lot of ways, especially against the run. Now, the Vikings really didn't attempt to run the ball much against the Buccaneers. It was a lot of Kirk Cousins just throwing the ball all over the field for them, just try and stay in that game. But they allowed the league best 41 total rushing yards last week. And the strength of this Bears offense is going to be against the run. And I think if you go best on best, I like the Buccaneers' chances of at least containing this run game for the Bears. And then you're forcing Justin Fields, who historically in his career has not been a good quarterback, when you force him to need to be a pass-first guy. I think it's going to be a very similar situation in this one. And the Buccaneers against this already starting to be banged up offensive line for the Bears. And they're missing Nate Davis most likely in this game, like you mentioned. They're already missing Tevin Jenkins, their other talented offensive lineman, heading into the season. So it's already a patchwork offensive line for the Bears that was bad last year, going against this Buccaneers defense. And then just Baker Mayfield was good last week. He wasn't great, but Baker Mayfield was good. This Bears defense is not very overly impressive. I think you're going to see a lot of just the same stuff. Baker taking the easy things. I think they're going to run the ball a little bit more in this game, and I think you're just going to see the Buccaneers play It's going to be an ugly game, and you're going to see the Buccaneers come out on top, in my opinion, in covering the 3.5 points.
Yeah, this. I actually have trouble trying to handicap this game because this is when I was talking about the Seahawks game, I mentioned the whole double-digit team coming and being the road dog. This is another one of those games where it's like I'm seeing the key number is like, oh, I'm getting 3. I feel inclined to take the 3.5. The whole thing about it is this is just probably going to end up coming down to a Baker Mayfield versus Justin Fields kind of thing. If you look at both of these teams' run defenses last year, they each did a very good job stopping their opponent from kind of limiting running opportunities. Then again, the Bucs don't really have a running back that of good caliber at the moment. Not a real believer in Rachaad White. I actually have him on unders in a lot of season-long bets. But it's just kind of it's a hard one to figure out because I do like some of the options the Bears have. I think the fact that they didn't use DJ Moore enough last week definitely played a factor into why things kind of got out of hand against the Packers. So I don't know. I think the Bucs that was kind of a weird one where they ended up squeaking one out against the Vikings. I do think their defense is very good, but I just don't have a lot of faith in anything the Bucs have offensively. And I know I shouldn't have that much faith in anything the Bears have offensively, but here I am going to take Bears 3.5.
Yeah, I can't talk myself into it. I know 3.5 points, and we just talked about, that being wide enough margin for the Titans to cover against the Chargers. But again, I don't really see the pathway for the Bears to win this game. I guess it would be Baker Mayfield maybe turning the ball over. But right now they're healthy enough on offense that I think they're going to be able to move the ball. And the Bears, I feel like this could spiral a little bit. Missing offensive linemen at all is brutal for them, and it's been happening, for a few weeks now, and they're just not talented enough to have that be a problem already at that position group. Then you look at Khalil Herbert, you look at DJ Moore, and they're viable players, but there's enough on the other side of the ball to account for them, and I kind of feel like that's all they have who are major threats. And then Cole Kmet, I guess you could include as well, but I just see a better overall Buccaneers team substantially. So I'm going to take them to cover 3.5 points at home. This NFC South division it's there for the taking, right? A lot of us have either penciled in the Saints or the Falcons. I personally had both of those teams going to the playoffs, but not the Buccaneers. But I always anticipated that it was going to be like a 10-7 team is going to win the division, or even a 9-8 type team. And so the Buccaneers are going to be seeing that. And, Todd Bowles has not really made his mark as a head coach yet, right? He had a great season in 2015 that fell short of the playoffs with the Jets. And then he had an okay year last year with Tom Brady at the helm. So this is him coaching for his job as well. So I do think that the Buccaneers will cover their 3.5 point margin for error here and come away with the game.
I have another just fun stat going into this game for this. We mentioned their offensive line a couple of times for the Bears. PFF has them ranked 30th going into this week as an offensive line. And I mentioned the Buccaneers did a really good job of stopping the run for the Vikings. Well, the Chicago Bears offensive line, this is wild, averaged negative half a yard before contact on run plays last week. So you've got that offensive line that struggled to block for their strength, which is their run game, going against this Bucs front seven. I think it's going to be ugly for this Bears offense.
Yep. I do agree with you, unfortunately for them. Okay, so they're probably going to end up having 2 high picks, which is just it's one of those things where it sucks in the season, but at some point you start to get excited about looking forward to. So just hang in there, Bears fans. You're going to have 2 high picks, so um, your time to shine is coming soon. All right, Chiefs minus 2.5 at the Jaguars. So Chiefs coming off of a loss in the season opener at home, and now they have to travel out to the East Coast to play Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 1-0. Now, I don't think anybody would really argue that the Chiefs are not better, but um, the Jaguars can move the ball quite well themselves at this point, and their defense is probably not quite as good without a player like Chris Jones to really impact the pass rush. But these are both expected to be playoff teams, so you can see why the spread is close. So, Bryson, what do you think about the Chiefs turning around things for week 2? I mean, do you think that they cover the spread? Do you think they win outright, or did the Jags show enough for you?
I think they're going to cover the spread here. Unfortunately, I don't love to say it as a Broncos fan. I don't love taking the Chiefs in games, but I think a big part of it is one, Travis Kelce most likely back in this game. That's huge for Patrick Mahomes in this offense. I don't think that wide receiver core can play that poorly ever again. That was one of the worst showings by a wide receiver unit I've seen in a long time. But getting Travis Kelce back is huge. Getting Chris Jones back is huge. One of the things I worried about with the Jaguars heading into the season was that offensive line, specifically in the interior. And it showed last week. DeForest Buckner really had his way in that game. Trevor Lawrence was sacked only twice, but he was pressured a lot. DeForest Buckner really had a good game against the Jaguars a week ago, had that defensive touchdown. And now you've got Chris Jones, who's arguably the best defensive lineman, maybe second to Aaron Donald. But you've got one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL coming back this week, and you going against this offensive line for the Jaguars. I think he's going to show out in this game. That Chiefs defense was pretty impressive in general, despite missing Chris Jones a week ago against the Lions. So I think there are a lot more positives for the Chiefs on defense than people thought there were after week 1. And this Jaguars team, I like this Jags team. I think they're going to be very good. I think they have a chance to, compete with the Chiefs. But ultimately, getting Kelce back, getting Chris Jones back is going to prove to make its mark in this game. I think the Chiefs are going to come out with a statement win in week 2. They can't start 0-2.
Yeah, I think with the mention of Travis Kelce, I should throw out there he is currently questionable, but I think he's slated towards playing. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire is questionable with an illness. And for the Jags, they're missing safety Antonio Johnson and corner Gregory Jr., who's a depth corner, I believe. And then their starting guard, Brandon Scherf, and starting center, Luke Fortner, are both questionable. And then defensive lineman Tyler Lacey is questionable as well. So, to not have Scherf and Fortner at least at full strength against Chris Jones doesn't bode super well. But Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just taking the Chiefs minus 2.5. You don't get that number very often, and I think the Jaguars will put up points in this game. It's just the nature of the beast with their offense. They have a lot of really good, solid weapons with ETN. Calvin Ridley looked awesome in week 1. So I wouldn't be stunned if they score a lot of points. The only issue is Mahomes is getting his number 1 receiving option back, and then the Chiefs are also getting their best defensive player back. And if anything showed in their season opening game, they need at least the number 1 receiving option, because nobody in Kansas City can catch a ball. So I would take the Chiefs minus 2.5. I think Travis Kelce does make that much of a difference. And I don't know. I wasn't overwhelmingly impressed with the Jaguars because, again, the Colts aren't very good, and it took the Jaguars a while to really get things to pull away from the Colts. And even then, the Colts had an opportunity to cover the spread in that game. So I think I think the Jaguars are going to make this interesting. I wouldn't be stunned if this is like a close game, like a one possession game in the fourth quarter. But again, if you're asking me in a close possession game who I want, Patrick Mahomes or Trevor Lawrence, well, I think that's a tough question for some people. I'd still take it's still Patrick Mahomes. So I'll take the Chiefs -2.5 in this situation.
Yeah, I think this game will be close. I just don't think that, less than 3 points is something that I'm buying into. So I do think the Chiefs end up winning. And again, and covering. I think with Travis Kelce out there, he doesn't even need to have a monstrous game to just help keep the offense on pace because he does so much to open things up for the other receivers. He does so much for the comfort of Patrick Mahomes. Like, he'll always be more comfortable scanning the field through his first couple of reads if he knows that he's going to be able to do a quick rollout and just throw 4 yards to convert the third down 8 out of 8 times, 8 out of 10 times or however, because him knowing that he's there, it changes the offense more than just him actually going out and having 7 catches for 130 yards, right? So I'm confident with him being out there for helping them win there. And then defensively, I think that, the Chiefs will be able to do enough to stop the Jaguars from just going crazy. And at the end of it all, I do think that the Chiefs are going to win by probably, I'm going to say somewhere around like 4 or 5 points. I think that's realistic, and that will cover the spread. So, all right. Next up, we have the battle of the rookies, maybe. The Colts are -1.5 going into the Texans. The Colts are missing a few players, possibly, with Quentin Nelson being questionable and Drew Ogletree, tight end, being questionable. The Texans are missing safety Jalen Petrie and safety Jimmy Ward outright, so 2 safeties will not be playing. And then quarterback CJ Stroud, starting left tackle Laramie Tunsil, and linebacker Neville Hewitt are all out, are all questionable. So here's the thing. I think people would probably be looking excitedly at the Colts regardless, just because of the performance that Anthony Richardson had. So I tend to think that we might see the line move as we progress towards game day in the favor of the Colts. But right now, I've got it at 1.5, and you can tell me if there's already an update. But the possibility that CJ Stroud may not play is not, I think, great for the Texans. I'm pulling up here to see who their backup quarterback is.
Isn't it Mills?
Yeah, it's
Davis Mills.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's got a little more experience in the NFL, but he also is relatively new to this offense too. So, I'm not sure how much that changes their statistical outcome, but people would prefer to see CJ Stroud for sure. So, Bryson, what do you think about this game?
So actually, what's interesting first is you mentioned how you expect the line to kind of move more towards in the Colts' favor, right? I was just kind of poking around. Some books have this game as a pick'em, and some books have the Texans as favorites. So I think that's very fascinating. I am going to pick the Colts to cover this one. I don't love it. I was impressed by Anthony Richardson. I thought he did a lot of really good things for the Colts a week ago. And then a lot of it comes down to DeForest Buckner had a really good game. I mentioned him a second ago. Had a really good game against the Jaguars. And he's going against this Texans offensive line, who's already on their third string center. They're already on a backup right tackle because Titus Howard is out. And now they're possibly on a backup left tackle if Laramie Tunsil can't go. So that's a extremely beat up patchwork offensive line going against this defensive line for the Indianapolis Colts. And I think if Anthony Richardson does just enough good in this game against a pretty below average Texans defense, and with CJ Stroud being questionable as well, that's a bummer that he's already questionable going into a matchup like this. But I think there's more going right for the Colts, and I was very impressed with Anthony Richardson in week 1. So I don't love betting on this game, but I'm going to take the Colts to cover the spread.
Yeah, you shouldn't feel comfortable about taking the Colts in this situation. I am taking the Colts minus 1.5 as well. This number actually flipped all the way up to like Texan minus 1.5. So
Mhm.
like the market actually likes the Texans. So this became the third game where it's like a team losing by double digits now in road dog. You take a look at it, and again, in this situation, it's essentially a pick 'em. So, I was in terms of what the Colts did, I was fine. The defense was or came up with the plays I thought they would. Again, they're playing against the Jaguars. Jaguars are going to score against a lot of people this year, so I wasn't overwhelmingly disappointed by that. Um, I think the thing is if they can keep Anthony Richardson upright because he got hurt a couple of times last game in the first game against the Jaguars, and then they limit his turnovers. They had a really basic game plan for him. If you look at his pass chart after week 1, I would say over almost 85% of his passes were to his right. He could not they did not want him to throw left. So I would imagine they're going to have a very simple game plan again. And against the Texans team where again they may be up to 4 different offensive linemen from their week 1 team, I think that's enough for them to at least win by a field goal. I'm not anticipating this to be a very high scoring game. I think the books all have this below 40. And just one note, in week 2 games, if the total is 40 or below, 47-19 and 3 is the under. So if it's low, if the books are telling you it's low, it's likely going to be low. So I think the Colts squeak this one maybe by 3 points. So I'll take Colts minus 1.5.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Colts here as well. The Texans, they have a few pieces on offense for sure. They have Dameon Pierce. They have Robert Woods and Nico Collins, and those guys are all fine, but there isn't anybody who really moves the needle for me offensively, whereas we do have that a little bit in Indianapolis. So I know that, their weapons are not listed among the best in the league, to be sure, especially without Jonathan Taylor there. But, you have an explosive quarterback who is a weapon in and of himself. And then, you have Michael Pittman, who's been there for a while. And so I think they're going to be able to move the ball a little bit better. Their offensive line is a bit healthier. Their defense was actually not bad against Jacksonville last week. So I'm going to trust them there. And only 1.5 is not too big of a spread. So if the team, if the spread is so small, then the team I'm confident in winning is a pretty easy choice for me to take. I'm trying to say that they're going to win by less than 1 point, or by 1 point only. It just doesn't really make sense. So Colts it is for me. NFC West matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. Now, the 49ers go from visiting the Steelers to visiting the Rams. So they get a 2-game road opening stretch, but they are favored substantially after their performance against the Steelers, minus 7.5. Now, the Rams also had a good game last week. 2 receivers over 100 yards. Defense looked sufficient against the Seahawks as well. So having the San Francisco 49ers come in at 7.5 favorites, that's a lot of confidence. Now, it was probably pretty well founded because they have a lot going on offense. But Bryson, do you think that they can win by 8 or more points?
I do. I don't. It's another one of those ones I don't absolutely love this pick, but I am going to take the Niners to cover this one. They are a road team, but it's not much of it. It's not like they're traveling to Pittsburgh, and that's a big road trip. This is just down the street. They're just going to LA. So there's going to be plenty of 49ers fans. It's probably going to be honestly 50-50 split of Niner fans to Rams fans of this game. So it's not going to feel like a road game, honestly, in my opinion. And the Rams did a lot of really good things against the Seahawks, but the 49ers are a different beast. I mentioned the Rams barely let Stafford get pressured at all. I mean, Stafford was pretty much clean the whole game against the Seahawks. This defensive line is a lot different for San Francisco. And Nick Bosa is going to get to Stafford at one point in this game. And that's when you see how much this offense for the Niners or for the Rams who are already missing Cooper Kupp. Now Puka's already questionable in this game. So Stafford's options are dwindling. They don't have the most explosive run game. We're going to see if this offensive line for the Rams can hold up against this defense for the Niners. I just don't think they will. And then I need people to start mentioning that Brock Purdy is just good. Brock Purdy is a really good quarterback. He continues to show out. He played against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Really good defense. Threw for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. Didn't turn the ball over. He was very, very good. This Niners offense in general has just got playmakers all over the field. I think that the Rams should feel very confident heading into this one with a big Week 1 win. But this Niners team it's a different beast, and I'm going to have them covering this spread.
Yeah, and again, with you mentioning Puka Nacua may be out, he is listed as questionable, with center Coleman Shelton as questionable, Ernest Jones, linebacker, and safety Russ East. They don't have anybody guaranteed out, but all of those guys have lingering injuries or issues. So 49ers, a little bit healthier with only cornerback Samuel Womack being out.
Yeah, I don't feel as confident in picking the Rams to cover this spread as I did last week. I thought last week I couldn't believe how large that number was last week. I thought that was a little bit of an overreaction to the end of the Rams season. But this week, man, again, 49ers are my Super Bowl pick. They look like it right out of the gates. And I think the key thing here is something you pointed out, Bryson, is just the quarterback situation has been solved. The second they made their decision, it was like, okay, Brock Purdy is the guy. We're not even going to mess around. We're moving on from Trey Lance. Instantly, they became an instant viable Super Bowl team because you don't have to think about any sort of controversy with that position anymore. If Kyle Shanahan's good with it, that offense is going to move. And because of all the weapons they have, McCaffrey, Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, the list goes on and on. They have a lot of guys that when they get the ball, they are gone. And so that's the situation for the Rams. And while I think the Rams defense does a really good job at piecemealing things together and keeping things solid, this is going to be really tough for them. And then on the flip side, if you're not going to have the guy that you relied on without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, I don't know how you're going to be able to gain anything on this loaded 49ers defense. Front seven's great, and their safeties and cornerbacks are some of the more are really aggressive. So I could see this getting out of hand, albeit it being a division game. This is just kind of one of those games where you have a team that's has better talent on both sides of the ball. And also the head coach, Kyle Shanahan, he's 9-4 against Sean McVay. So again, this is not a matchup that usually favors the Rams, regardless of talent.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, Puka Nacua is probably going to play, so he'll be banged up and most likely out there. So, that's helpful, but the 49ers are just so good at every place, literally everywhere across the board. They're loaded. They have decent to good corners, very good safety, very good linebacker, very good defensive line, multiple players deep, and then good offensive line, very good skill players, and good quarterback. And I just have a hard time. I mean, look, for me, there's absolutely zero doubt that they're going to win this game in my mind. But the question is just, is it by more than a touchdown? Even though I want to say no, because divisional rivalries are usually pretty close, especially if one of the teams does have a quarterback like Matthew Stafford. But it does kind of seem like one of those games where the 49ers are just going to keep coming in waves, and we'll just start to see the score spread out, because I just don't think that the Rams are built to contend with a team like the 49ers, especially right now when all those guys have been there for 1, 2, 3 seasons, whereas the Rams are integrating so many young players who haven't really been in the systems or been in starting roles or even been in the NFL. And I just have a hard time seeing them really keep it close in this game. Even if it's up through halftime, I think by the time we get to the end, the 49ers will separate. So I'll take the 49ers at -7.5. The New York Giants, who did not look so good on Sunday Night Football, are going to travel to the Arizona Cardinals, who didn't look so good in midday football. The Giants have most of their players still. They didn't lose too many people from last week. They are without Wan'Dale Robinson and Azeez Ojulari for the most likely situation. And Andrew Thomas is questionable. Whereas the Cardinals are missing defensive lineman LJ Collier and linebacker Josh Woods, with offensive lineman Kelvin Beachum being questionable, along with defensive lineman Lecky Fotu and safety Buda Baker. So Giants, I think the expectations were lower for a lot of people, even though they went to the playoffs last year. I don't think anybody expected them to play as poorly as they did last week. And then the Cardinals' expectations couldn't be lower going into the season, while I would say that they had a valiant effort against the Commanders in Week 1. They did not get blown out by any stretch. So, Bryson, what do you think? Do you think the Giants get right here? Do you think they can do it by more than 4 points? How do you feel about this breaking down?
I have the Giants getting right and winning this game and covering the spread. They were embarrassed. They had to have been the most embarrassed team in the NFL a week ago. I mean, that have a lot of hype coming into this season because it's New York. New York gets excited about their teams when they do well from a previous year. And they not only went to the playoffs, they won a playoff game. So a lot of stuff was going right for New York coming into the season. And to not only lose to your divisional opponents, to not only get blown out, but to get blanketed. Like that Giants offense couldn't do a thing against the Cowboys defense last week. I think Brian Daboll is going to have them more prepared for this when they're going to play better against the Cardinals. I have the Cardinals finishing with the number 1 overall pick, so that's part of it. I just think the Cardinals are a bad football team. But I think you're going to see a lot more Saquon Barkley early, get the run game established, let Daniel Jones get a little more comfortable. Because that was the big thing. Daniel Jones just could never get comfortable. How many times did he get sacked last week? He got sacked 7 times against that Cowboys team. He just never had a chance to feel comfortable in the game. I think he's going to have a better chance of getting going early against this Cardinals defense, which performed pretty well against the Commanders. They did sack Sam Howell 6 times, so this Cardinals pass rush was able to get to Sam Howell quite a bit. But I think the Giants are going to look at this game pissed off, embarrassed, wanting to get onto the right track and not starting the season off 0-2. So I think this is a get right game for the Giants.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Again, the Cardinals are playing a quarterback in Joshua Dobbs that wasn't even on the roster to begin before Week 1. So I mean, again, I was like, they're kind of just, again, I don't know what you guys ended up picking as the number 1 pick holder, but this team is by far the number 1 candidate for that. Mm-hmm. So I think just overall Giants, I definitely think Week 1 was not indicative of what the kind of team they are. They're likely not as good as they were last year, just by virtue of they most certainly overachieved last year. But with that said, they should they're 4 points better than the Cardinals. Their roster's better than the Cardinals. I would say their coaching's better than the Cardinals by a lot. So even though they're on the road, I still see the Giants being able to come away with at least a 4-point victory. I don't see a lot of scenarios where the Cardinals, let alone win outright, just even cover a 3-point spread. There's not a lot of scenarios in my mind that lead to that sort of outcome. So I'll go with the Giants -3.5 here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the Cardinals, they just haven't shown me anything that I can hang my hat on, either offensively or defensively. And that's pretty much what we expected. And while the Giants certainly had a bad showing on Monday night, there's a lot that you can hang your hat on from last year. Their offensive line is not going to be able to be taken advantage of in the same way that it was against the Cowboys. Even if Andrew Thomas doesn't play, I don't expect Evan Neal to be just roundly beaten the same way. I think they are going to be pretty upset with how they performed on Sunday night, and I do think that they'll be able to kind of come back and at least for 1 week sort of quell the doubters, and then we can see how they play going forward against some better teams. But this is a great opportunity for them to start feeling better about the trajectory of their season. All right. We have the New York Jets at +8.5 going down to the Dallas Cowboys. So this is a pretty big spread. The biggest spread of the day, I think, or tied with the Raiders and Bills, which is interesting because I think the Jets are a way better team than the Raiders. And yeah, I think they're a way better team than the Raiders. So I'm a little surprised at this spread. Breece Hall, offensive lineman Mekhi Becton, Dwayne Brown, so both starting tackles, and Greg Zuerlein are all questionable, but all are most likely going to play. All have that injury designation from previous injuries before. So this is nothing different than their entire preseason and week one, right? And all of those guys look pretty decent week one. Then the Cowboys have Tyler Smith as doubtful, which is an improvement, I believe, because I think he was just listed as out last week. So it's a slight improvement. And then safety Donovan Wilson is doubtful as well. Wide receiver Brandon Cooks is questionable, with Zach Martin questionable as well. And I'll double check, but I think I saw a report that Cooks was leaning towards probably not playing, but I need to check on that.
That's what I saw too.
So yes, injuries are more impactful for the Cowboys right now. Jets lost Rodgers, which we have not talked about yet. So obviously, yes, that was brutal, but they have a chance to go into Dallas and be a relatively whole team, all things considered. So, Bryson, what do you think about the Cowboys coming away with a 9 or better point victory?
I'm going to take the Jets to cover the spread. I think the Cowboys win this game, but I'm going to take the Jets to cover the spread in large part because I have the under hitting, and it's a really low under already. It's an over-under of 38.5 points. And my rule of thumb when I do this kind of stuff is if it's already a low total, I'm taking the under. I can't take a 8.5 point win either because I think that just those two things don't go together. For me personally, I think it's going to be a defensive showdown through and through for both teams. I am worried about the Jets' offensive line. They did allow 13 pressures on 26 dropbacks last week, so a 50% pressure rate. And now they're going against this Cowboys defense that got 7 sacks on Daniel Jones a week ago. It's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL in general. So I think Zach Wilson's going to see a lot of Cowboys in his face, but I think Dak Prescott's going to see a lot of Jets in his face because this Jets defensive line and its pass rush is just as good almost. I think it's going to be up there. You mentioned, Max, you think they might have a chance to lead the league in sacks this year. The Jets will. So having Zach Martin and Tyler Smith both injured in this game is not a good sign for the Cowboys. I don't think there's going to be a lot of explosive plays. I think you're going to see both teams scoring less than 20 points going into this one. And if neither team is putting up points in this game, I can't take a team to win by 9 or more points. So I do think the Jets lose this game in the end. But I think just out of terms of defense, they're going to stay in it for the most part. So I'm going to take the Jets to cover 8.5 points.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Again, low total. I was like low total. It's hard for you to rationalize it being beyond an 8-point game in such a low total game. And I'm right there with you because again, the numbers would bear out that in this scenario, a low total in this game, they're usually going to fall in the under category. And so I just think 8.5 points is too much of a gap for the Cowboys to try to cover. I also think that this is a little bit too much of an overreaction to like like everybody hating Zach Wilson and thinking he's not that good. I don't think he's great, but again, the Jets were really good with him not playing all that well last season. So I still see a scenario where even if Wilson isn't good, that Jets defense is more than capable enough to keep this game close. Because it's not like we were just talking about the Giants getting boat raced by the Cowboys. It's not like the Cowboys offense did anything of note during that game. That was all purely defense and special teams for the Cowboys, making that game out of note. So I definitely see the Jets being able to hold down the Cowboys defense or offense and keep this game close throughout, whether it's a field goal game or even just a touchdown game. I see the Jets offense having multiple opportunities. And I will say, like, the one player prop I'm very happy to take every single time is Breece Hall's over under rushing yards right now is 3.5 or 38.5 right now. I would take the over on that. That guy looks really healthy right now. And again, as we saw on Monday night, only he can cover that number in one rush. So I definitely would look at that very hard. I actually used the DraftKings 50% boost on that to get the number into plus money territory. So I think it's the just plus 8.5 here. I don't know in such a low scoring game if the Cowboys are going to be able to win by 10 points.
Yeah, for me, quite honestly, this is the easiest pick of the week because you don't have to feel like the Jets are going to win. But if you think that their defense is going to allow that much of a lead, I really think you didn't watch what they did this past week. And I know that, people might be saying, well, what about the Jets offense? What if they're turning the ball over and they're getting defensive scores? Well, look, one, the Jets special teams can score too, right? We saw that happen. They're so good in every other part of their roster that they could also put up defensive points as well. To expect the Cowboys to come out and just trash the Jets, I think is so foolhardy and such an example of people wanting and expecting the Cowboys to be good and wanting and expecting the Jets to be bad. Now, I'm not saying the Cowboys won't win the game, but I am saying that it's kind of shocking to me that the spread is this large. I guess it's really just because of the trajectory of the betting, right? That's got to have pushed this up because I can't really see otherwise how it happened. The other thing is that the Cowboys were put in the best possible situation on Monday night. Early score on special teams, and then another quick score where the ball was basically tipped up while Saquon was getting tackled, and then that was a pick six. And that's against a team that is not built to come back from behind. Now, I understand that if the similar thing happens to the Jets, yeah, we could see it get ugly because they might not be able to rely on Zach Wilson to sling the ball around. And I'm not taking anything away from the Cowboys defense, but ultimately, if you are given that kind of a lead, a great defense can help you run away with it. The Jets had to go up against Josh Allen from behind, so their performance was ultimately more impressive to me, right? I think statistics aside, the Jets, the 49ers, and the Cowboys had the best defensive performance from week one, in whichever way you want to rank it. But I think that the offense that the Jets had to go against was by far the most challenging. So regardless, I'm just saying that similar to last year when I was constantly picking the Jets because I always felt the spread was just way too big for how good their defense is. It looks like we're right back to that again this year. So I'll take the Jets plus 8.5. All right. Commanders plus 3.5 at Broncos. So Commanders squeaked away with a win over the Cardinals last week. The Broncos somehow lost to the Raiders in their own house. I believe this was in Denver. So they come away 0-1. I would put these teams pretty equally. So I I guess there's a home field advantage here for the Broncos, but I would think the spread would be slightly closer. That's just my opinion. The Denver Broncos are looking to be missing um, Greg Dulcich and Frank Clark. The Commanders are missing Jartavius Martin. So all three of those guys are out. Nobody else is listed as questionable or doubtful for them. So Bryson, how did you feel about the Broncos' Week 1 performance, and how do you feel about their chances to win by 4+ points here?
So I think they did a lot more good week 1 than I think people give them credit for, especially on offense. It wasn't the offense wasn't explosive, but it was efficient, especially in the first half. They left 4 points on the board with Will Lutz missing a field goal and an extra point. So that's 4 points they lost out right there. I was actually, at the end of the day, I was less impressed with their defense, even though they gave up only 17 points to the Raiders. The amount of third and longs they gave up in those last 2 drives where the Raiders took the lead and then held on in the final drive to win it, it was abysmal to give up that many. I think they gave up I think I saw 8, or it was like 6 or 8 third and longs in those 2 drives. You can't give up those type of plays to the Raiders in Denver. I was very disappointed with Damari Mathis, the second-year corner. He got picked on by Jacoby Myers, who I mentioned earlier. Ultimately, I am doing it to myself again. I'm going to take the Broncos to cover the spread. I was not impressed with the Commanders. They were playing who we all have as the ending up with the number 1 overall pick this year, and it took a while for this Commanders team to really get going against that team. The Cardinals, who I can't name a pass rusher for that team, got to Sam Howell 6 times. I think the Broncos are going to be able to get to Sam Howell a few times in this game. I think one of the things that people don't talk about enough when they talk about the game last week is the Broncos' offensive line was very good. It was a very good performance for them. They allowed a league best only 13.8% pass or pressure rate last week. They only Wilson got pressured 9 times last week. Only got sacked twice. The offensive line performed very, very well against a guy like Max Crosby, who's far better than anything the Commanders faced last week against the Cardinals. This defensive line for the Commanders is very good, but if you go strength on strength, I think the Broncos' offensive line has a chance to at least neutralize the Commanders' defensive line. And then the Broncos are getting Jerry Jeudy back, and that was a big thing. They were missing that explosive guy, that guy that can take a 5-yard slant route and go 70 yards with it. They were missing that with Jeudy last week. There was a bunch of underneath stuff, nothing real explosive. They had 2 plays of over 20 yards last week, so I think you're going to see a lot more explosive down the field plays with the Broncos in this game. I think that there's some weaknesses in that Commanders, both offense and defense, this Broncos team can exploit. I think Russell Wilson was better than people give him credit for last week. I thought he was efficient. And I think you're going to see Sean Payton mention it. They're going to take more shots downfield. They need to take more risks in this game. So I think you're going to see a lot more explosiveness from the Broncos. This is my last week, though. If the Broncos lose this one, I can't take us to cover another spread if we're favorites. So this is my last week. I'm really holding out hope. In a must-win game in week 2, I don't see Sean Payton starting 0-2 to start the season.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I have the Broncos -3.5 here. I was actually fairly high on the Commanders. I didn't take them as a playoff team, but I thought they'd be close to what the Giants were last year.
Mm-hmm.
But then I kind of saw what they did against the Cardinals. Like, well, maybe I need to walk that thought process back a little bit. Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of the Commanders. The fact is they didn't look great against probably the worst team in the NFL. And that doesn't draw me a lot of confidence going against the Broncos, who, albeit the Broncos do have to work through their own issues. Still, I was like, capable head coach, capable quarterback in most scenarios. So I would highly lean towards that, especially when they're at home. I guess the main concern is like I'm assuming the Broncos are going to be able to get at least 1 sack against this Commanders team, because they had some issue getting to the quarterback against the Raiders last week. So I would definitely go with the Broncos -3.5. This is kind of just one of those ones where you just go with the veterans, go with the more experience on the other side, because the Commanders still are kind of young and their quarterback is very inexperienced in Sam Howell.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I'm going to take away as far as the Commanders not playing not dominating, I guess, the Cardinals, because it's week 1 with a new coaching staff and new players, and you don't really have tape, and it's week 1, right? So I'm not going to necessarily like use that to really decide a lot of anything at this point. This is a game where anyone who's given 3.5 points is who I would take. So if the spread was switched, I wouldn't even be surprised, and I'd just take the Broncos. But I'm going to take the Commanders at +3.5 because I don't really feel good about either, and I'm just going to take the points as a little kicker. Honestly, that's how I'll put it. Take it. So I'll also move a little faster because I know we got to get Brison out of here. The final game.
Oh, you're good. We can take as much time as you want, man.
Okay. The Dolphins -2.5 at the Patriots on Sunday Night Football. So Patriots get a 2-game home stretch against 2 good offenses. They managed to hold the Eagles quite well last week. The Dolphins are even more explosive, but their strength is not in their offensive line. It's very much in the playmakers. So we'll see how the Patriots hold up against that. Dolphins are going to be going into the game with tight end Julian Hill, tackle Teron Armstead, linebacker or edge rusher rather Jalen Phillips, and defensive back Elijah Campbell, all listed as questionable. While the Patriots have quite a few players questionable themselves in wide receiver Devontae Parker, offensive lineman Michael Onwenu, offensive lineman Sidney So, offensive lineman Trent Brown, offensive lineman Cole Strange, and cornerback Jonathan Jones. So it seems like their entire starting offensive line is banged up. And now all 3 of those starters could very well play, possibly. But it's still not going to be an easy task to play against this Dolphins defensive line when banged up. So really, I think the biggest question here, and this is on everybody's mind, is can the Dolphins still have a resounding offensive performance despite how good that Patriots defense is? Because I don't think anyone's sitting here and putting these 2 teams close because of the Patriots offense. It's really that matchup. Kyle, what do you think?
It's actually kind of funny. If I'm not mistaken, Tua Tagovailoa is 4-0 against Bill Belichick, and I am anticipating him being 5-0 by the end of today. So I would go with the Dolphins -2.5. I'm actually kind of stunned that this line is still at 2.5. I would have thought that at least there'd be enough Dolphins backers to move that up to 3, maybe 3.5. But I was so impressed with what I saw from the Dolphins offensively. I think defensively, there's obvious concerns, but again, Chargers know how to score points. So I'm ruling that out as more of an anomaly more than anything else. I thought what the Dolphins did offensively was awesome, in terms of just being able to get everybody open. Like there were guys getting wide open on every play if they gave Tua enough time. And even when Tua was getting pressure and everything, he showed the poise that I think a lot of people were kind of worried about in just being able to step in the pocket and slide out of the way. So I was really impressed with what the Dolphins are. I do realize they're on the road in New England. That can always breed some weirdness and wackiness, but I feel confident after seeing what I don't think I'm overreacting. I thought that's what the Dolphins were going to be offensively, and that I didn't see anything to move me off of that point. So I feel pretty good that the Dolphins offense is going to be able to maybe not reach the peak that they were against the Chargers, but be more than capable enough to outpace the Patriots by at least 3 points.
So I think this is fascinating because a lot of people, I know I've talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people are kind of confused by this line. The Patriots did perform quite well against the Eagles. They actually outgained the Eagles offensively a week ago. So the Patriots offense was actually, Mac Jones threw the ball 54 times. I would hope he'd throw for over 300 yards in that instance. I don't think they're going to make Mac Jones throw the ball 50 times again in this game. I also don't think Bill Belichick is going to leave Tyreek Hill one-on-one press man coverage all game. I think he's going to find a better game plan than that, than Brandon Staley could figure out. Ultimately, I'm with Kyle. I have the Dolphins covering this one. I don't think Tua is going to throw for 466 yards again. I don't think Tyreek Hill is going to have 200 receiving yards, but they were able to pressure Herbert last week, a much better offensive line than the Chargers. They got to Herbert 3 times. And now this same Miami Dolphins pass rush is playing against this Patriots offensive line, which already wasn't as good as the Chargers. And now it's banged up. So I think they're going to get to Mac Jones more often. I think Tua's, even if Tyreek Hill doesn't go off, they just have Jalen Waddle next to him to go off. So they have weapons galore for this Miami offense. I don't think that the Patriots are going to be able to keep up once the Dolphins get a lead and that pass rush starts getting to Mac Jones. I think you're going to kind of see the Dolphins pull away in this one. So I can see a reason why the spread is closer than people think, but ultimately giving the better football team only a 2.5-point favorite in this game is kind of like stealing money, in my opinion. So I'm gonna take the Dolphins to cover the spread.
So I am going to go with the Patriots here. So the biggest reason that the spread is so close is that it's good on good and not as good / unproven against not as good / unproven, right? It's the Patriots defense against the Dolphins offense, both significant strengths. Belichick's great at taking away what you do best. They are a finesse team offensively, whereas the Patriots are talented enough on the back end with their corners to cover pretty well. And like certainly against most teams that don't have Tyreek Hill, but they are so much more physical in their front seven than the Dolphins are their offensive line that I understand why people foresee the offense not being as successful, because if you think they are going to be as successful, then that's why it's so obvious to take the Dolphins, right? Because we don't expect the Patriots offense to be that explosive or dynamic. So this is really a testament to what people think of Bill Belichick's defense. And so I'll take them at home here 0-1. I'm interested to see how this game plays out for sure. I mean, this is going to be must-watch TV for, at least going into it. I'll take the Patriots and their ability to get after Tua by rushing the passer with Josh Uche, with Keon White, with Matt Judon as well. I think those guys are going to have big games. And then just those big guys in the middle, they have an opportunity to really set the tone for this game. So, yeah, I mean, I understand why people are so excited, but I just don't think we're going to see anything like what we saw this past week. Like, this game is just fundamentally going to be so different than the Chargers and Dolphins were. So I'll take the Patriots here to cover. And even though it looks like the majority of people are picking the Dolphins, I think, people like me are exactly why this spread is what it is. So that's going to do it for us today. Shout out to Noah Ashley, our producer, who popped in today for the first time. So we might be able to get him consistently on our morning shows. He's over in Europe, so he's not really able to do our late night shows, but it'd be cool to have him back. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at TheMaxDean. You can find Brison at Brison Owens 16, Kyle Nishida at Kyle_Nishida. You can find all of our work on Defiant Takes. I'm tired today, guys. DefiantTakesFootball.com, and we are at Defiant Takes FB on Twitter. And of course, we are live Sunday, Monday, and Thursday on the channel, doing all kinds of previews, recaps, the whole 9 yards. And I will say that we are most likely transitioning to Saturday morning for our pick'em / preview show, which means that you'll be able to get it on the podcast feed as well. So this is probably going to be the last Sunday that we do this. We'll give Saturday a little tester. Be sure to follow. Be sure to follow Noah Ashley at No Ashtray Sports as well. And I think I've hit all the points. So that is going to do it for us today. Enjoy your football Sunday, fellas.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.